All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. We hope you had a wonderful Christmas if you celebrate. And unfortunately, are joining you after a Boxing Day defeat. A rare Premier League loss for this Chelsea team, losing 2-1 to Fulham in historic fashion, breaking the wrong type of records in this one. I think we have a couple opinions that we want to share in terms of this performance. Was it worse than the Everton results, or was it potentially a better one on the bounce? We'll get into that. Let's take a look at maybe a very strong performance from Cole Palmer in 60 minutes where the team looked very, very dangerous, and maybe how Maresca continues to struggle in his adaptation to the Premier League. And then we'll take a look at, some of the things that he said about certain players not being available. Some real question marks starting to develop around players, particularly like one Christopher Nkunku, potentially, and what his availability and kind of contribution looks like. But Nick, just before that, at least before kickoff, I think he had a pretty good Christmas. So at least there was some holiday cheer before the match, right?
Yeah, great holiday. Always good to be home and spend with the family. And, I don't take that for granted. I know a lot of people don't necessarily have that. And so it's always, a good time of year to kind of regroup and sleep in and get fat and happy. And that's basically what we did.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. We definitely appreciate everybody reaching out, sharing some well wishes with us during the holiday season. We hope you enjoyed the holiday mailbag as well. That was great to see. We did get some 3-word match reviews to break down the results. You had definitely not us from Ibernese. I think, Nick, you're going to align with that one. We had Mike from RI with Boxing Day blunder in Classic 86 with arrogance and complacency. You had CMXCL with stop sitting back. Matt Fitz with one I'm going to disagree with, December to forget. On the bounce, when you're 7-1-1 this far into December, that's actually a really strong December, relatively speaking, from a Chelsea fan's perspective. You have an opportunity to go 8-1-1. So I don't think it's a December to forget. Maybe not Alexis December to remember. Again, not sponsored. We would take the sponsorship, but,
They wanted to send us a car even. That'd be neat. Whatever floats their boat,
Oh, well, if it has an engine to last 90 minutes, we might appreciate that. But do you have a 3-word match review to sum up this one?
Cole, not Cole. And I think that's kind of where we're at. It was the fossil fuel, not one Palmer, who ended up dominating the discussion here.
Yeah, I think you would. I would just do the same word 3 times. Subs. There's a very interesting question that we'll get into about how we're using or maybe not using subs appropriately to spell this side and remain in competition across the fixture. But before we get into all... Yes?
Should we do a Jersey Mike's sub of the match sponsorship for the club? Come on. Get your number 13 Italian, just roll it in there.
I honestly don't. Look, you get the double nod. You could get a Maresca moment in there too with the Italian. There you go. Exactly. I didn't know number 13 is what it was. So that's
Jersey Mike's. Reach out to us. Obviously, we have so many ideas that we could integrate sub sandwiches into. Let's do this.
Like to me, it's all about neighborhood delis. So I really am not looking for a chain type of deal, but for the pod, I would be willing to make the exception. Look, before we get into that, we just need to drop a quick little plug and remind people there's still time to sign up for our wonderful trip over to London to see the Chelsea men's and women's team play in at least 2, if not potentially 3 matches over the end of March and the beginning of April. I know, Nick, believe we actually have passed 10 people at this point, most likely, who have signed up. I think the official count was 9, but we've also had a couple people reach out before our XL Tours got back to us saying that they had signed up. So we're somewhere in having a double-digit sized group to hang out with.
That's right. Yeah. So, we hope to, by third week of January, have a pretty good idea of where the numbers stand. So you still have a few weeks to kind of contemplate, consider. Please reach out to us, contact@londonisbluepodcast.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, or if you want to potentially add on anything to the trip, you can work with XL Tours to do that. We did try and honest to God, keep costs as low as humanly possible for this trip. We understand it's an expense. We understand getting tickets to Chelsea matches is not the easiest thing for international fans. Even if you are a part of a group like Chelsea in America, staying in London is not the cheapest city in the world. So we did try and keep everything as tight as we could. But we anticipate having a really good time. And hopefully the team is back to their kind of early December form by the time that we get over there, not their late December form. So again, any questions, reach out to us, DMs, email, and we hope to see as many of you as possible come over.
And that gets us into the match review part of this. And then on the back half, we do have a wonderful conversation with our friends from Carefree, Louisiana about Blues Day, which we'll be making the trek down to New Orleans for the first time to see them in late February as a part of that. So very excited. So Nick had a bit of a chat before Christmas with them to get that locked into the back half of this pod. So stay tuned after the match review for that portion of it. But look, it was Chelsea in the Premier League this past Thursday. The 26th of December, Boxing Day fixture, not the end result we wanted. Chelsea finished 1 to Fulham's 2. Cole Palmer in the 16th minute got it going and had us very, very excited, but it wasn't meant to be. Wilson in the 82nd minute and Munez in the 90th plus 5. It was heading to a draw, and that would have been way better than what we ended up with, but that was as it went and as it stood. Our lineup involved Rob Sanchez, Marc Cucurella coming back in off of his suspension. You had Levi Colwell and then Tosin, who got jeered quite heavily and quite frequently, particularly in that first half. Did not get a kind reception, unfortunately. Malagusto in the right back spot, and it was Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez in the midfield. And you saw Sancho, Palmer, Neto, all behind Nico Jackson up top. And it was one sub. That's right, one sub off of a full bench. Nkunku in the 73rd minute. You had Bettinelli, Jorgensen, you had Achiampong, you had Disasi, you had Cassidy, you had Tyreek George, Joao Felix, and Mark Guiu. All of them potentially outside the two on the bench, the goalkeepers particularly, could have come in and maybe had an opportunity to impact the match in some way. We also saw that it was a tactical decision, according to Enzo Maresca, for Nane Madueke to not be involved on the bench in this one, Nick. And I mean, just in general, thoughts, feelings about the lineup in particular, what we saw run out, or maybe just, the bench inclusions or the exclusions?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, I think you're not really at a spot where you can do too many tactical decisionings at this point for leaving players off the bench. I mean, putting two goalkeepers on the bench is simply a signal to someone like Noni, who must not have had a good week of training or something, because it's a pretty poor, I think, lineup selection in that regard. Excruciatingly thin in midfield if Cesare Cassidy is your backup midfielder. The fact that, obviously Mudryk is going to be out for a little while. You still don't know the B sample on that yet. Reece James still out, Fofana still out, Badiashile still out, Lavia still out. It's, no Dewsbury Hall on this bench either. You're kind of like working through the options that you don't see, and I think they're just as telling as the options that you do see. And then, even for someone like Joao Felix, who, I think has had kind of an up and down year so far, but is, consistently putting in, decent performances in the Conference League, to not get any minutes in this one. I think there's some huge questions to be asked about the selection and where Maresca's at from a, kind of getting this squad to do what he wants them to do sort of standpoint. So, yeah, I don't know about you, Dan, but I looked at that and I was like, oof, we are excruciatingly thin in some areas.
Well, when you look at some of the top line stats, I think there's a telling story here. 1.12 XG for Chelsea to the 1.78 for Fulham. We had 3 big chances. They did as well. We had 12 shots to their 14. 5 goalkeeper saves to their 7. A phenomenal performance from Leno on the day. Absolutely a difference maker for them. Popped up in multiple occasions to keep them ahead. And then, 13 free kicks apiece. We had 1 yellow card to their 3. Could have been more. I would target it, though, on the fact that actually it was our shot quality that let us down. When you look at the fact that they only had 2 more total shots, yet their XG was over a half goal better in comparison. I mean, we really had, so on the goal that Cole had, it was a 0.06. So it was a really good take and almost a pass into the back of the net. It wasn't even like a real shot. Phenomenal take. But it was the Marc Cucurella headed shot in the 35th minute. That at a 0.17. And then it was later, Jadon Sancho's attempt was a 0.22. So, and then the Nkunku chance at the very end, the very, very end was a 0.27. So in general, out of those shots, we were not creating a lot of really high class, high quality opportunities. And I think this gets us into that like first discussion point. It's just in terms of setting up, in terms of coming to play into these matches, getting ready to take on the opposition, we did look really good for that first 50, almost 60 minutes. It looked very comfortable, potentially should have been 2 up, potentially should have been 3 up. Great goalkeeping from Leno. But the quality of the shots were not good enough to put us in a position across the 12 that we had to actually come away with a second goal or a third goal, to beat past a goalkeeper who was having a really great day. And so, I think, we were talking before we started recording just from like a context perspective, Nick, but I mean, it's like we have 3 losses the entirety of the season. We had 8 losses in the Premier League at the same point last season through 18 Premier League matches played. I think this one stings way more than the Everton results because it's a loss to Fulham. It's a loss at home, kind of continuing a pretty poor home record for this Chelsea team relative to their away record. How are you feeling about it? And maybe just, do you have any thoughts around where Maresca could try to make changes to improve the shooting boots, to get this team to be a little bit more clinical in the attempts or the chances that they're making? Are you seeing things that are not looking right as they try to play out on the pitch?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there. I think the first thing is that when that Cucurella chance doesn't go in, to me, it felt like it's going to be one of those days. It's going to be one of those days. It's a perfect ball. He literally could have headed it any other millimeter of a way, and it goes in. And then, of course, we meet Bern Leno, who's going to have, a day himself and, kind of bring back that old adage that opposition goalkeepers really stand on their head against us. And he did. I mean, he had a great game. I think was the highest rated player on the pitch, if I'm not mistaken. He was tied with Cole. Yeah, at an 8-3. So that was a huge bummer. I thought we looked good in possession for that first 60 minutes, but, I don't think we did enough to really cement it. It felt like we should have had 2 or 3 goals by halftime, and it should have been done and dusted, and we should have been able to make some subs on the way out and have a very nice Boxing Day. The team just did not do that, and the longer you let a 1-goal lead go, the longer it feels like the other team is going to jump back into it. Not only did Fulham jump back into it, they dominated the last 30 minutes. They were much, much better than we were in every phase, and that's really disheartening. We haven't been totally outclassed, I think, except for a little bit at Liverpool, and maybe like the first 20 minutes against Tottenham where we looked pretty bad. We haven't really been out of a game like that and on our back feet, like that, or on the back foot, I should say. And it brought up a lot of interesting feelings and thoughts for me because I think this team has largely benefited from going on a really great run to start the season. They've been able to make critical lineup swaps in different games to keep the team healthy. This is our second game in now 4 days, and the team just looked completely gone from a leg standpoint after the 60th minute. It looked like we were running at half speed and Fulham was running at full speed. So I'm worried about conditioning. And then I'm worried about the buildup too, Dan. I really think the inverted fullbacks today were both terrible. Cucurella and Gusto had really bad games apiece. Gusto was worse for me. And the amount of space that is let in behind when the inverted fullback does not revert to their natural position. It's all well and good trying to have the mismatch and try and push Enzo Fernandez up and get him in dangerous areas. But, Gusto in particular had an awful day. And Pedro Neto basically had to play right wing back to help him, defend against Fulham's counterattacks. In particular, Iwobi in the second half just kind of had his run at him. So there's a lot of stuff to dissect here, but I think it was overall a very odd game. I thought we looked really good for a bit, and then we completely lost it at the end. And I'm sad about that because a result today would have been really nice.
Yeah, especially considering some of the other results and fixtures that really broke our way to continue allow Chelsea to
Totally.
make up ground on other teams who potentially were dropping points for the solidifying, that top four, end position, potentially keeping pace with Liverpool, which does not likely seem to be the case after today's result. When you flip it actually from first to second half, I mean, we basically created less XG in the first half, but we had 5 total shots. We had 7 in the second half, but really it changed for Fulham. Fulham had 5 total shots, 0 big chances in the first half. You flip that to the second, 9 shots, 3 big chances. So 3 of their 9 shots second half were 0.3 or higher in terms of like expected goal, which would tell you that like, hey, not only were they taking more shots, but the shots they were taking were of a higher quality, and they were getting in positions that we should not have been allowing them to get into, which then comes into how are we setting up, what the shape is. I mean, I think Gusto was caught out quite frequently. Like that was a really rough time that he was having, in particular with Robinson and Iwobi kind of going down that flank. Like he was really, really struggling. And to your point, like Neto had to track extremely far back in large portions of the game to try to alleviate some of that concern, particularly as Enzo was pushing forward to try to kind of add that thrust in attack and kind of continue to move the ball forward. I do think the Palmer free roll worked really well today. I mean, I think in general, like he's very, very good in that 10 spot behind Nico Jackson, like that freedom he had to go horizontal to the left-hand side, to the right-hand side, to put himself into a position. Like I do think he was getting to really good spots. I think Sancho, to me, struggled a little bit again, just holding up a little too long on the ball, maybe not releasing as quickly. I think there were a couple of times we just looked off in how we were connecting with some of the players in attack and just not making that transition fast enough. I think it was a tough day for Caicedo too. So I think in general, like your point, maybe the fitness felt like it was a very much a real opportunity for this team to get into a position to be comfortable again. I guess I would say the only saving grace at this point is we do get an extra day of rest between now and the match versus Ipswich. Ipswich plays tomorrow, and that gives them one less day to be ready for our match. So if you're looking for any type of positive heading into the next fixture in terms of fitness, like that would be a good one. Maybe it gives some of the players on the fringes an opportunity to come back or at least get a little bit more rested from this one. But yeah, it did not feel like the inverted role, particularly of Gusto. Tosin I thought was pretty decent. Colwell is probably a little bit better from that perspective. Sanchez was great, I think, with his actual keeping today. His distribution was a little unfortunate. I mean, that definitely gave Fulham the opportunity on the goal. So I don't know if he was a Bob Burt. I don't know what to call him when he was half great and half not.
It felt to me, I don't know if you got the same thing, but it felt like to me the game was, in the first half, our skill was taking it to their physicality, and in the second half, it felt like their physicality was taking it to our skill, and that they just wanted it more. And they are a physical team. They have a couple of extremely physical players, Bassi, Adama Traore, right? Even Iwobi, extremely physical player. I think these are things that the referee kind of let a lot of stuff go in this game, including a second yellow for Juric, who that was their kind of holding midfielder. And we didn't really ever get back into the game physically. There were times where Caicedo was really trying to be the enforcer. Didn't quite work out. Didn't have the same effect, and our skill guys were just kind of lost in the sauce a little bit. Even Cole Palmer in the second half was really struggling to get on the ball. There were a couple of moments where he just kind of stopped play and like recycled the ball just so we could have possession and get back into a rhythm. But very few, I think what we'll talk about and kind of point two is very few impacts from Maresca in this game, switching up the current lineup or adding subs or whatever. And I think it really did hurt us in a game where we failed to kind of recapture the momentum.
Yeah, let's get into that in a second. We're going to take our first ad break, get that out of the way. When it comes back, it's all down to, I guess, that Jersey Mike's number 13 Italian sub of the match from Enzo Maresca, because there was only one. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, again, lots of free plugs for Jersey Mike's in this episode for some reason.
Not a sponsor. Would love it, but not a sponsor. Yeah.
I guess I don't know if they have Jersey Mike's in the UK. So it's a sandwich shop or a sub shop in the US. I don't know if it's franchise or owned, but that's neither here nor there. What we do know is there was only one sub for Enzo Maresca in this match, and it came in the 73rd minute. It did feel like it was a reaction to the fact that Harry Wilson came on the 67th minute for Traore. You had then two more subs, 73rd, 74th minute from Marco Silva, who definitely saw something that he wanted to change, and change it did, and absolutely put them in a position. I mean, those subs were made in the 73rd, 74th minute. They scored in the 82nd to bring it level. And so definitely that made an impact. And now we've seen two games in a row where Enzo Maresca hasn't used the full subs, 3 subs across those 2 matches, has subbed them in maybe at weird times. I mean, it's, getting Nico off. I mean, actually, even though he didn't score a goal, like I actually thought Nico, from like a holding up some of the Fulham players, kind of creating some spaces, actually was doing a good job in this match. I mean, he was not great, but I felt like he was definitely, doing something. It's also the second time in a row where Nkunku's come on in the Premier League, and I'm kind of scratching my head. I'm like, we're talking about, and he's saying that he's not a number 9, he's not a striker, but he's playing him like a number 9 and a striker, and it doesn't seem to work out too well in the Premier League. And I mean, look, Conference League hero Mark Guiu is sitting right there wondering, I can play a striker role. I could feast on some Cole Palmer delivery to me. Why not me?
Well, I mean, I think the why not me could extend in a lot of places in this game. Even Joao Felix, who has played off of the left when Palmer's been in the game. I think we have some quotes from Maresca coming up about the decisions he made. I think there's also a huge shout for Josh. I mean, Malo Gusto was hugely struggling in this game physically. Josh is a hell of a lot more physical, maybe not as skillful, but a hell of a lot more physical than Malo Gusto is, and I think is a much better defender in that way than Malo's shown this season. So, you got a couple of players who are really struggling, who, even if they're fresh, are not playing that well. And then, you have the old conundrum of what do you do with Nkunku? And so far, Enzo Maresca has decided that Nkunku is simply never going to replace Cole Palmer in a game at that number 10 spot, even though that is his, quote, best position. So instead of moving Cole Palmer over to the right for a Pedro Neto, who was on a yellow card at that point, and I think was probably being a little cautious in some of his trackbacks to not get a second yellow card, you then enter into this fray where you have him on a yellow, you have Sancho, who's not really producing anything of note, and you have a stubborn inflexibility to try any other solution. And so I think there was a right, sort of frustration with Maresca today, because there are many different combinations that could have been tried, whether it's different personnel or different ways of mixing up the current players to produce something different. And neither one of those really happened. And it does make the question about depth hugely important as we move into the new year. If you have a bunch of players but you don't use them, not saying that that's a consistent thing. I think this is only the last couple of games where we could possibly bring that up. Do you have depth? Do you have depth that you trust in big moments? These are the questions.
And I think this is not saying that, we have a major problem with Maresca or anything of this nature. Like, I want to couch it appropriately. Like, he is performed above expectation for this Chelsea team to be, at current time of recording, second in the Premier League. If Arsenal were to do what likely would happen against Ipswich, hopefully not, but if they do, I mean, we would go down to third. But like, we are very much ahead of schedule this season. There's been a lot of really great moments and things to celebrate. Again, really strong December overall relative to Decembers in the past couple of years that have felt pretty awful. I think it's more just is this a reflection on how he feels about like the quality of players he has on the bench, that he can't necessarily go to them when there's no West Fofana, when there's no Lavia, when there's no Badiashile, that is there kind of those players that come in and rotate the back? I mean, because you could have seen potentially something where if Gusto wasn't doing it, we have seen the Caicedo right back situation work out well this season. Like that could have been something we tried, but Lavi's not available. You have a situation where, you're playing Tosin when you probably want to be playing Badiashile or West Fofana if they're available, which potentially makes this a little bit more stable from a defensive standpoint, which gives Cucurella a little bit more opportunity to advance. Might give Gusto, if he's playing in that right back spot, a little bit more opportunity to advance. And so I think the on the bounce, probably not exactly who he wanted in the starting lineup from our defensive set piece, defensive and midfield combinations, which I think then points to, okay, if he doesn't feel good about the depth, then the question then becomes, well, did we buy appropriately in the summer to get all the players we need? Dewsbury Hall not getting selected in a Premier League game, even for the bench. That is majorly concerning. Madueke as a tactical decision. I know he can get dispossessed or kind of get disconnected from the ball at times, but he has shown a improvement in his defensive game, and potentially being able to put Neto on the left-hand side and put Madueke on the right-hand side could have been valuable in this game to shore up that right-hand side. So, it does bring up questions just around what will Maresca do to try to address this, to try to fix this, and this is now the time. You have 2 matches before the FA Cup match. You have Ipswich Town and Crystal Palace. Great opportunity to win 2 matches and then look back on this as just a blip within the month of December, which is wonky for everybody. City have had some crazy results. Arsenal have had crazy results. No team is impervious, seemingly other than Liverpool this season, to wonky results in the Premier League. So I think this is more it's not a trend line yet, Nick, in my mind, but it is just more a point of order, a point of concern if it were to continue beyond, kind of this match into the next, 2 Premier League matches we have, which are on bounce, extremely winnable.
You would have said that for Everton and Fulham too, though, right? So this is what I'm saying. We had the easiest stretch of games that.
Well, you did say this was the toughest one. This is the one that you called out and said this was going to be our toughest match, and it did prove to be correct. So hats off to you for getting it right. Maybe you are unhappy you were right now.
Yeah, I am unhappy that I was right, and for the record, I did beat Ollie in my prediction there. So I just, you need to win these games against teams that you should be beating, and I think the fact that we lost this at home is up there with the Palace result from earlier, up there with the with the Forest result from earlier this season. We just have not been as good at home as I think I would have expected. The away form's been good; it's been making up for it. Obviously,
away form's been great.
So.
Yeah, I'll back you up on the math point for that. If you just did a home table and an away table, Chelsea are 8th in home form. We are behind Liverpool, Brentford, Arsenal, Villa, Newcastle, City, Forest in home form. We have played 9 at home. We have won 4. We have drawn 3, and we've lost 2 with a +4 goal difference. You flip that to away form. We are as good as Liverpool. It's basically 1-2, 20 points apiece. I guess that's going to jump up here if they win this match against Leicester. 6 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss, +13 goal difference. Liverpool, Forest, Arsenal, Bournemouth, Fulham, Newcastle, Brighton, West Ham is your top 10 there. So we have also not been great at home. Again, 2 of those matches also involve our, 2 of our, kind of key losses there. So that, we didn't get to play City when everybody else did, which is the unfortunate part of this season. But there's definitely an opportunity to correct this. There's definitely an opportunity to address it. I think some of the Maresca quotes we talked about, like the Nani Madueke decision, potentially the Joao Felix and Cole Palmer quote that he had, saying that they, you can play them together, but it's all about the balance of the decision. I don't know. It feels like covering a little bit, maybe just a little much.
I think, again, I would have liked him to come out and say, hey, didn't exactly get it right, and I think we have stuff to work on, significant stuff. I think the fact that we've seen a little bit of regression with the tactics over the last couple of matches is an indicator that maybe, we need to kind of go back to basics a little bit ahead of Ipswich and Palace and get that right. There are times where this team is absolutely flying offensively, where they look really good and really dynamic. And, we can't have any complaints about the goal scoring this year because the goals have been flowing. But I think in moments, sometimes it gets too loose. Sometimes the team gets too, pressed up too high to try and get that second, third goal, and it leaves huge vulnerabilities at the back. And I think he needs to go back to basics with the rest of these guys, ahead of, 3 winnable games. You got the 2 Premier League games, you have the FA Cup game, and get back to basics, start doing the defending stuff right again. Start, whoever is going to invert, make sure that they are very clear in their responsibilities, and then take this thing forward. I think the other thing that I've kind of noticed is awfully relying on Palmer in the last couple of weeks to do something, and we need a hell of a lot more. For me, a lot more production from Sancho, from Neto, from Jackson to get ourselves in a space where he's not solely relied upon to carry the goal scoring and assisting weight. So, I think there's some significant stuff to work on. I mean, we're likely going to end this December neck and neck with Arsenal in clear second place, with Liverpool probably about 10 points ahead of us when they get their game in hand sorted. And that means that we wasted some opportunities to stay close to them. If we're being honest, we can have a great December record. I think we're still going to end up losing ground. And so I think hopefully at this point of the year, we can all say, let's focus on top 4. Let's make sure that we do our diligence and we get the results that we need against the teams that we should beat. And then, if it is to be later on in the season, we can talk about whatever we want to talk about then, but let's just bring it down a notch.
Yeah, so I think I would kind of comment on the fact that, yeah, we have been reliant upon Palmer. I mean, the last 6 matches in the Premier League, so he would have 5 goals across those 6 games and 1 assist. Yep. He did blank on the Everton-Brentford match, so good return to form here to get a goal contribution or get a goal in this one. So very nice to see. I mean, to be fair, the 2 goals against Tottenham were penalties, so maybe we kind of consider that just a touch, but I mean, they were critical in the win. So to be fair, they're very, very crucial. I do kind of think your point though on the other contributors. If Cole can't do it by himself, this was the Eden Hazard problem we had in previous seasons, where you need someone else to be stepping up with a level of regularity, whether that is Sancho, whether that is Pedro Neto, whether that is Nico Jackson, and you can't have them all fail at the same time. And so now we've seen 2 matches where like they have all objectively, if you don't score, even if you got into a couple good positions, you failed. And so that is something that hopefully, you don't have a lot of days to train. You don't have a lot of days to get ready for Ipswich and Palace, but figuring out how to get those players with the ball in a position to shoot rather than pass, or potentially slow down and hold up and get a block, is going to be critical.
Yeah. And I would say this too, like there should be so much competition within that winger group that because they train hard every week, there could be a different combination every week, right? Because they're outside of Noni, who's pretty right wing focused. Neto and Sancho can do either job. We don't know what Mudryk is going to do in the future. I think that's up for debate. Cole Palmer can play on the right, and I wouldn't shock me if we saw him in some figuration getting back over to that side for a little bit. Not for any reason other than to try and accommodate different other types of players like Felix and Kunku when legs are a little, not as well rested at this point of the year. So I think there has to be some different formations tried. There has to be some different personnel tried, and you just hope that everyone is available. I think that does lead us, nicely into the January transfer window, which we will do some analysis on needs and wants and all that other stuff, because I think maybe I wasn't feeling as great about the squad today as I was 2 weeks ago. But, this is it's a real critical moment. We've seen Chelsea in previous seasons not take advantage of the momentum that they have. I hope that this team can kind of reflect on these 2, I think, pretty bummer results and go, hey, we dispatch Ipswich, we got to dispatch Palace, who are not good, and then we really got to take care of business as we head into February, March time, because it's critical.
Well, look, Chelsea get an opportunity, though, to quickly forget this match and put it in the dustbin, as it were, by playing and beating Ipswich Town away. Again, away record, very strong. So feeling good heading into this one on Monday, December 30th. So we'll be back for a match review after that one. But just kind of a reminder for you, we currently sit second in the Premier League table at time of recording. Arsenal has not played yet. They're the only team that could jump us with a win, which potentially pushes down to third in the table. We are plus 17 on goal difference still, which is second best after the plus 23 that Liverpool has right now. And again, we are 1 point ahead of Forest, 2 points ahead of Arsenal currently, and then Newcastle in fifth on 29 points, so 6 points ahead of them. So nice gap from those in fifth, sixth, seventh place for us at the moment. You just want to keep that momentum going. But I think that's any other comments, thoughts, feelings from this match, Nick?
It's starting to be a logjam. 6, 7, 8, 9. That those places too. I mean, Newcastle and Bournemouth are technically tied on 29 points, with Newcastle having the better goal diff. City on 28, Fulham on 28, right? Villa on 28, and then it drops down to Brighton on 25. You drop too many more opportunities, you're going to be back in the rugby scrum, as it were, and that's not really where you want to be. You want to be kind of elevated above that group and let them fight it out amongst themselves for, who's going to get that fifth spot. So, every win is critical.
Well, let's hope Chelsea rebound, get the win, and end the year of 2024 on a high before taking Crystal Palace on in the new year. But that's going to do it for the match review part of this podcast. Don't forget, we've got our wonderful conversation with our friends at Carefree, Louisiana, talking about Blues Day, which if you're in the U.S., you might want to head down to New Orleans for in late February. I think it's going to be a real riot, and we'll be there too. Nick and I will definitely be there. There might be drinks. Who knows?
We will certainly be enjoying ourselves. Dan and I both enjoy New Orleans and its fine cuisine and party atmosphere. So we will see you down there if you choose to go to Blues Day. That's the Aston Villa weekend, so that's a particularly spicy match in there as well. But you know what? I'm going to pass it over to myself, Dan, and then I'll pass it back to you to close it out. How about that? All right, Nick, take it away.
All right, welcome back, Chelsea fans, to a special little insert of the London is Blue podcast. If you have been around a while, you know that around this time every year, we do a special shout out for our friends in New Orleans who are hosting Blues Day, and Blues Day being a celebration of all things football and Mardi Gras celebration. This year, of course, whereas we usually have one or the other, we have both Dylan Polk and Roy Welsh on the show. Boys, how are we doing? And what's going on?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, Nick, we're great, man. We really appreciate the time. Excited to see you boys in a couple of months. It's going to be great.
That's right. Yeah. And so if you are, we'll get through kind of the details and everything that's going on here. But if you are going to Blues Day, there is a high likelihood that you will see myself and Dan Dormer down there enjoying and imbibing in the overall atmosphere of Blues Day this year. Been a long time coming, but we have decided to saddle up our horse and ride down to New Orleans. Dylan, let's just kind of, for those who are uninitiated, who don't know or who haven't listened to these inserts before, can you just tell us a little bit about Carefree Louisiana and what you guys got going on down there?
Yeah, so Carefree Louisiana is the coalition of 3 different Chelsea chapters in the state. Home base kind of New Orleans. Baton Rouge also has a chapter, and so does Lafayette. And we're over 100 members strong, just trying to grow the Chelsea community as is, and kind of started over more than a decade ago by our brother Ben Landry, who also helps run this event with us in Baton Rouge. And he was building a chapter at the same time that we were in New Orleans. We just didn't know each other. And we wanted to become an official group and put our heads together, and fast forward over a decade, and we're over 100 people strong, 3 chapters deep, trying to host a national event and making it something more.
And I guess, Dylan, let's just talk about the origins of Blues Day before we get into specifics, obviously, about this year's event. But how did you guys come up with this concept, and how has it kind of taken off over the years?
So randomly, it's actually Roy and I were sitting on my front porch, drinking a couple of beers talking about how can we make what we're doing down here bigger and better. And I said, why don't we host an event in New Orleans during a game weekend, like get people down here? And Roy was the one that threw out the idea, why not during Mardi Gras? Like every town, like what's going to bring people to a game? Because why would I go to, I don't know, Cleveland, Ohio just for a game weekend? No, you wouldn't go there for that. But New Orleans, it's different. There's already a culture. There's already a stigma around one of the most historic towns in the country, if not the most historic town in the country besides New York. So Roy threw out the idea, let's do this during Mardi Gras, where not only are we attracting people to the biggest party in the country, but we can have a Chelsea theme on it as well. So I got to credit Roy with, I may have had the initial spark, but Roy brought it home.
Roy, you're my expert on all things Mardi Gras and partying. Can you explain for the folks who have not been down to New Orleans in the month of February what it's like, what they potentially are getting themselves into by combining these two great things, Chelsea and Mardi Gras?
So what you're getting yourself into is intense fun, is what I will say. And I would even say that for all kinds. Obviously, when you think of Mardi Gras, you think of excess of food and drink. That's kind of the point of Mardi Gras to a lot of people. But regardless, you're going to there's people and energy everywhere. You've got seemingly nonstop parades. You've got high school marching bands that are better than bands that people pay money to see. You have float displays that have the kind of half-baked originality that you cannot understand until you've seen it. Mardi Gras is, I've joked to you before, Nick, people say it's a marathon, not a sprint. And after I had been here a year, I began correcting people and saying, no, it's a marathon and a sprint. New Orleans is an amazing place. If you come here for Mardi Gras, you are going to have a blast. You just need to take lots of naps before you come and be prepared to take lots of naps after you leave.
Well rested and well hydrated.
Rested and well hydrated.
Yeah,
correct. Preparation is key.
Preparation, but yeah, proper preparation prevents poor performance. The old 5 Ps there.
Correct.
Dylan, you mentioned before we got on that something new this year that you guys were doing was around the Blues Day Council. Can you expand on what this is?
Yeah, so Roy and I had been talking for a while. Like he and I go back and forth all the time, like how to ways to improve our event, how to improve our chapter, all that. Roy's actually the president of the New Orleans chapter, and credits all to him for keeping that growing as it is. And one of the big things is how do we get more people involved in this? Because like Roy and I could be an echo chamber, if you will, just piggybacking on each other's ideas, but we needed to get ideas from people who've come to the event from outside. So this year we have so far, I believe it's 5 heavily influential people in chapters across the country, guys from New York, Florida, chapter creators of Dallas and Houston. Like founding members of those are, and another chapter head from West Texas. So we're trying to make this as inclusive as possible and make it a situation where it's not just a Carefree Louisiana event. It feels like it's for Chelsea fans from all over the country because we want input. We don't want it to just be the same thing every year. We want to know if you're coming to New Orleans, what do you want to do? What do you want to experience? So that way, you look at the event year 4 where we've got our ideas, but year 10 is going to be so much better because we've gotten input and we've gotten feedback and we made mistakes along the way to make it better for people. Because once again, this is just an idea of a couple guys drinking some beers on a front porch that's turned into, I believe at one event we had 17 chapters represented. So like it's wild. It could be 1 or 2. I talked to Jesus, the founder of Chelsea Houston 1905. They're bringing like 20. So
they're no fun whatsoever either. 0%
that's what I hear. That's what I hear. So yeah, that's kind of how it's going now.
Roy, do a 30-second recap on what happened last year. This is obviously we're entering into the 4th Blues Day this year, but the 3rd annual Blues Day last year, it kind of happened right as Chelsea were kind of turning some things around in the season and the vibes were improving a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what happened last year.
So we had Dylan. The match last year was on a Sunday, correct?
That sounds right. Yeah, it was a
It
Sunday, and then we
was.
went to the parades after. Yeah.
It was. So last year, the event, as Dylan kind of mentioned earlier, it's been different every year because wherever the match falls kind of influences how the party is planned.
Mhm.
Last year, the event began on a Friday as normal. We started with a pub crawl in the French Quarter, started in the lower quarter.
Something light, just
Something
to get everyone
light,
going.
yes, exactly. Something light. And we did a pub crawl. I think we did 3 or 4 pubs. We ended up at a seafood restaurant where one of our former bartenders from our old pub bartends and has remained a friend of the club. So we wanted to go see him. The next Saturday, we started for parades. Our setup team, which included myself, my vice president, and probably 4 or 5 other guys, we set up along the parade route right next to our pub, probably at around 5 a.m. We had probably 30 cases of beer and 15 handles of liquor. And I think probably 4 gallons of gumbo and rice and assorted king cakes and other foods that are appropriate for New Orleans and Mardi Gras. We raged out on that parade spot all the way through the parades. There were probably 5 of them that day. They probably went till around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was an absolute torrential rainstorm during parades last year. And there were probably 40 of us all the way through that rainstorm, dancing and drinking and singing up a storm.
Commitment.
It is very difficult for people to look at you sideways during Mardi Gras because everybody is so used to people acting crazy. And there were legions of people looking at us sideways during that portion. A group of us went out and continued the festivities well into the evening. We had a few hours of being semi-unconscious while we recharged our batteries. And then we went back to the pub the next morning for the match, watched the match, and then watched more parades afterwards. That was kind of Dylan, what am I missing? Is there anything from the recap?
You didn't miss anything. I mean, you covered the very little sleep. That's about it.
Very little sleep.
Yeah, I mean, Dylan, let's walk through the itinerary this year, right? It's similar vibes, a little different. Talk about the pub
a little
location.
bit different. Instead of the initial pub crawl, which can kind of get scattered and people going, we're going to meet at one of our locals' houses. It's got a gorgeous house in the French Quarter. We're going to cook for people. There may or may not be a live podcast from another group that's coming down. And we're going to party there and hang out and then going to go do parades that night. Next day, right now, it's planned for a pub day with parades afterwards, or go explore New Orleans on your own, because we want people to do that. You don't have to monopolize your entire time with us. We fill the time appropriately. So if you want to go see the French Quarter, you want to go down to Bourbon Street, you want to go down to Frenchman to listen to some live music, you want to go to eat at one of our members' restaurants. Because we have, I'm gonna go ahead and just throw a spotlight. Emerald Lagasse and Emerald Lagasse Jr. are members of our group, and they've got fantastic restaurants in town. Go send them some money. So depending on whatever you want to do, we fill it appropriately so we can take as much or as little as your time as you want.
The game is slated to be on the Saturday. Obviously, we know we're recording this on December 15th. We know that dates can change, and I don't think we'll fully know until the 1st of January if those dates in February are going to change. So might be a couple weeks ahead of time here, but assuming the match stays on Saturday, are we a little bit of Friday warm up, match day, big day on Saturday, and people dispersing Sunday. Is that kind of the schedule?
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean,
Same
that's pretty
pub
much
as
it.
last year.
Yeah, same situation as last year as well, and all that's on the site.
Beautiful. You mentioned the online store this year. You guys are setting up a store for the first time. What's going on with that?
Yeah, another situation where merch can be purchased, and that way we can also make a little money for charity as well. Send it toward the American Cancer Society.
Beautiful. What are, I guess, each of you, what are you most looking forward to about the weekend? I'll start with Roy.
You know, Nick, all joking aside, New Orleans people, we love to enjoy life. I cannot wait to see everybody that has come in previous events, but also first timers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that really is why we do it. It's to grow the connection and grow the bond between supporters in the States. You know, I feel like that can really sound hollow if you haven't met us. And I would understand why it could, but it really is something that's important to us, is to try to put our arms around people. You know, sports can be contentious. There can be I mean, Nick, you and I both know, like it can pull like your opinions out, and we can draw like battle lines over our teams. And this is one of those where we like just pull each other in for a big bear hug. And as they say in the South, we just get in a big pile and have a big old time. But really what I'm looking forward to the most is, so on Sunday, after the event is winding down, and obviously event days can schedule for all the listeners, right? You should be checking the schedule, because a Sunday event could get slotted to Saturday if the match gets flipped. But as of now, the World War II Museum is headquartered in New Orleans. And there were quite a few Chelsea boys that made the ultimate sacrifice in World War I and World War II. So we plan on having a tour of the World War II Museum. We're sort of figuring out logistics. One of the people that has spearheaded this, we have an active duty Marine in our group. His name is Eddie Gallegos. And Eddie is a
Very cool.
huge member of this club, one of me and Dylan's dear friends. And he also was super enthusiastic about this idea with his background. So he's been kind of spearheading that. We're planning on giving some sort of talk about highlighting some of the Chelsea men who laid down their lives in the First and Second World Wars, to sort of bring it home and just remember the impact that Chelsea has had in so many ways on so many different people, ways that we might not normally think about outside the sporting side of things. But don't get it twisted. I'm also looking forward to partying with everybody and having a good time and celebrating what life's all about.
Dylan?
I just want another 3 points from the game, because we're just 3 points each week. We're not in a title race. I just want to get my 3 points.
Cole Palmer, what? No idea what you're talking about. I never have.
We're not in a title race. Just keep saying it. We're not in a title race.
Some are just saying it. I frankly believe it. May look back on this and laugh at myself. But look, guys, you guys kind of know the drill. We don't do promotion for everybody in the world on this show. I think we do reserve it for the things that are unique and special, and I do believe that Blues Day is one of those things. Again, Dan and I are planning to be down there February 21st to the 23rd in New Orleans. Again, I think there's going to be a lot of different stuff going on. We may do something a little special. We have to kind of coordinate with the boys here and figure out what that might be. Can you guys, or Dylan, can you quickly touch on like accommodation, where people should stay, that sort of vibe before we close this one out?
We're recommending everybody, fit what fits your budget. Everywhere in town is pretty easy to get to. If you've got, Uber, if you've got, Lyft, etc., you can get where you need to go. If you are paying attention to, what time of the day it is, like just a trip that normally takes 20 minutes is going to be double. So if you're wanting to stay somewhere that's more affordable with a group, go get you an Airbnb somewhere in Mid-City. If you're wanting to experience New Orleans culture and history, go get a hotel in the French Quarter. If you're wanting to save money on your budget, you can get a hotel out in the Metairie area and save a little bit of money and, carpool into town, whatever's going to be easier for you. That's the biggest thing I would say. Do what works for you. We'll be there ready.
Awesome. All right. Well, you guys heard it here first. We're very looking forward to being down there with you guys this year, and we have a ton of exciting stuff coming up with this. So whether you are in for the party or in for the history or in for both, please consider going to carefreelouisiana.com/Blues Day. That's where all the details are. The online store, schedule, everything that you need to know is there. And very excited to see you boys in a couple months.
We can't wait either, man. The pleasure's all ours.
Seriously. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, we are going to pass it back to the show to close, and then we'll be out.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate you, buddy.
Well, all right. That's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. Again, Nick passing it to himself. The most selfless man on this podcast, that's for sure. But that's good for this one. So don't forget, if you're interested in coming to London, check the link in the description. Love to have you on that trip there. And don't forget, Chelsea are doing phenomenal this season, both on the men's team and the women's team. And, we're not Man United. We're not Tottenham. Like, there's a lot of things here that we can kind of continue to celebrate and recognize here too, because boy, oh boy, we don't have rat infestations to worry about, or mice. Let's be fair. Yeah. It's a mice infestation.
Yeah, it could get much worse than being 11th or 14th. Lopetegui's West Ham ahead of Man United right now. So,
well, look, opportunity for Chelsea to get a front of kit sponsor very soon. Potentially in the running still for that Jordan Brand deal. Again, lots of positive things to take away from this one. So don't get down too much. This is just one result of many. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep blue flag flying high.